What is at the core of your OCD? What is your core fear? In this video, I'm going to describe OCD core fears and why knowing your fear triggers and your core fear is important in creating an effective ERP, exposure and response prevention plan to treat your OCD. Hi, I'm Paige Pradko, a psychotherapist that specializes in treating people with OCD, health anxiety, and anxiety disorders. Now, before we get started on the meat of the video, if you're wondering about whether or not you might have OCD or Pure O, I'm leaving a free self-quiz in the description of this video. It's right down below. And I'm also leaving a link for my PDF on the top 10 things you need to know to practice ERP for OCD and anxiety disorders. Now, what is your core fear? And why is this so crucial to know when you're treating OCD with ERP? Well, people with OCD and anxiety disorders have a core fear, and they have different stimuli or triggers like thoughts, images, sensations, situations, activities, objects, events. Anything can trigger that core fear. Now, if you have OCD, you'll likely do anything to avoid triggering that core fear. We call those avoidance behaviors. And you do extra things to protect yourself and others from your core fear, and we call those behaviors compulsions, rituals, or safety behaviors. ERP, exposure and response prevention, it's one of the most effective evidence-based treatments for OCD. It's referred to as the gold standard for OCD treatment. Now, sometimes people may add other therapies to ERP, like medication, ACT, motivation interviewing, and mindfulness-based therapies. But in ERP treatment for OCD, you expose yourselves to something that triggers your core fear. And then we practice what's called response prevention, and we refrain, we resist from doing the rituals, the compulsions, or the avoidance behaviors. By not responding to the fear and the discomfort and anxiety, or by doing your compulsions or avoidance behaviors, you allow your brain to learn that you can tolerate and endure the discomfort, and then what you thought would happen doesn't happen. And that's called safety learning. So understanding your core fear, that underlying fear is important, and sometimes it's not so obvious, even for OCD specialists. For example, a person that washes and cleans excessively may appear to have a fear of contamination, and that they may get sick or make somebody else sick in their house. However, this is not always the case. It's also possible that they could have a fear of not feeling just right. And no matter how much they try to wash, they have this difficulty feeling like they've done it right, or it's completed, or it feels right. Their core fear is that they're never going to feel just right, or completion, or just clean enough. And that not just right feeling might even get worse. So to do ERP treatment effectively, you really do need to identify that core fear and come up with ways to trigger and face that fear while resisting doing the mental or physical compulsions. Now, according to Dr. El-Nayed, the most common core fears are causing irreversible damage, suffering, or being bad in some way, or death. Now, Dr. Greenberg suggests that your core fear is a form of emotional suffering, and that you're afraid of having to live permanently in the state of emotional suffering. For example, having to live feeling shame forever, or rejected, or hopeless, or trapped, or not good enough. I agree with Dr. Greenberg's view that core fears do seem to have this element of fearfulness of emotional suffering. But I look at core fears of having primarily three broad categories. It's similar to Dr. Alec Pollard's view with a slightly different perspective. First, there's a category of people that have difficulty sitting with or tolerating distressful, uncomfortable feeling And we call that the not just right feeling of OCD. This is not exactly uncertainty. It's more of a feeling of being off, uncomfortable, like distressed or disgusted, as described by some people. But people also, kind of get this feeling often when they're maybe entering or exiting buildings. They're washing, they're driving, maybe they're checking. They're redoing these compulsive behaviors because they're trying to get this just right feeling. Second, there are others who, describe a particular catastrophic event that they fear and they want to avoid. For example, I'm afraid that bridge is going to collapse and I'm going to die if I go over that bridge. So this is called action fusion. They think it's going to happen. They feel like thinking it is kind of like it's going to happen. Now, there's also this undefined fear that people have that something bad is going to happen. And that is actually having difficulty tolerating uncertainty in different areas of their life. Like, what if this happens? What if I do that? What if I didn't do that? What if I do this wrong? What if I cause this or that? How will I ever live with myself knowing I did that? So it's related to what Michael Greenberg is getting at when he describes the fear of making some irrevocable mistake that causes them to live in a state of emotional suffering forever. But it's also related to not trusting yourself and uncertainty. And we just, it's impossible for us to have certainty in this world about, just about anything. So I call this the fear of uncertainty about making a mistake, resulting in something bad happening that causes emotional suffering forever. Those are all heavy burdens to bear. I want you to think of what is central or at the core of your OCD. Are you afraid of not feeling just right and that it's going to haunt you or get worse if you can't get that just right or completion feeling? Are you afraid of one catastrophic event happening? Or is it uncertainty or mistrust in yourself about you might make this uncorrectable mistake, a devastating mistake that results in you feeling guilt and shame, emotional suffering forever? Is that at the core of your OCD? I have clients, and I try as I might, I just can't seem to fit them into one of those categories because they kind of hit two of them. And what we do are we just make sure we're doing the exposures that trigger those core fears. So a helpful way to identify your core fear is ask yourself, like, what is the consequence if I don't do these rituals and compulsions? It usually makes it clear what the core fear is if you ask yourself, what is my feared consequence? Before you can do ERP, you're going to need to come up with creative ways that you can trigger your core fear. These will be your exposures. And your response prevention, the RP of ERP, will be resisting the urge to do your identified rituals, compulsions, and avoidance behaviors. If you'd like more information about whether you have OCD or PRO, I'm leaving a link to a self-quiz in the description of this video. And also I'm leaving a link to my PDF on the top 10 things you need to know to practice ERP for OCD and anxiety disorders. If you need more help for your OCD, please contact me at paigepradko.com. Until next time, I'll see you in session. Take care. Bye-bye.